Hi Year 12, this is Miss Paps looking at how discovery is explored in the second half of Home Burial. So as you listen to this, make sure that you have your copy of the poem in front of you and annotate along with me. If you have any questions, make sure you write them down and then bring them to our next lesson so that we can talk about them then. Just a reminder, this is by no means an exhaustive analysis of this poem. I'm just focusing on the lines and techniques that clearly relate to discovery. So feel free to make extra annotations if you notice other techniques that you think might be important. So we're looking at the top of page 10 in the poetry booklet, where the husband is speaking to his wife, pleading with her to help him to discover how to help her. So in the second line here, he says, "Tell me about it if it's something human." So the use of the word "if" there is what we call a conditional term. So it shows that there are limits to what can be discovered. So if it's not something human, then it's something that he can't discover, is the implication there. So it's emphasising the limits of his ability to discover. So in that way, you can link him to the character of the farmer in Mending Wall, and the fact that the farmer in Mending Wall is the kind of person who doesn't discover things. He just doesn't have the right personality for it. Again, we have the two word choices. I'm not so much unlike other folks as you're standing there apart would make me out. So these two words really emphasise the differences between him and other people, even though he's asking her not to focus on the differences. And so again, that creation of a sense of separation and a sense of difference suggests that he is separate to the type of people who can discover, so he's a different type of person. So moving on fairly quickly, we're looking down at where he continues to speak, and he says, "It's come to this, a man can't speak of his own child that's dead." So "it's come to this" is a definite tone, and "a man can't speak of his own child that's dead" is a repetition of a phrase that came up earlier in this poem. So earlier in the poem he said, "Can't a man speak of his own child he's lost?" And now he's changed that to, "A man can't speak of his own child that's dead." So the shift from the question to the statement indicates that this has been discovered. This is something that he has learnt. In addition to that, the fact that it's a generalisation, so not "I can't speak of my own child," but "a man can't speak of his own child," shows that it's a generalised idea. So that as well links to the idea that when you make a discovery, you generalise from your own personal experience into a universal experience. So that links into Tuft of Flowers, where the persona makes the positive discovery of the flowers and then links that in to a generalised view of the world that men are never working alone, even when they're apart. Okay, so then continuing on, we have the woman speaking, the wife persona, and she returns to the concept of seeing here. So where she says, "I saw you from that very window there." So this return to the concept of seeing shows us that seeing is a way in for discovery. So you see something and then that leads you to a moment of discovery. It's also a play on words, since seeing and discovering could be considered synonyms in many ways. So carrying on to the next. So I'm just going to sort of move through the details and focus on, again, "I went near to see with my own eyes." So again, seeing has become a motif for discovering throughout this poem. In particular, at the end of the stanza, it says, "For I saw it." So the idea of seeing has been positioned at the end of the stanza, which gives it more emphasis. So that idea of seeing and discovering becomes really prominent in the poem. And what she's just discovered in this section is that he contains his emotional response, and she sees that as lacking an emotional response. So he replies to that revelation of her discovery with repetition. So he says, "I shall laugh the worst laugh I ever laughed. I'm cursed. God, if I don't believe, I'm cursed." So the repetition here creates a sense of really bleak despair, which he's feeling as a result of the discovery that they've had through this poem. So you can see in this case discovery has led to a negative experience, whereas in Tufted Flowers it's led to a positive experience, and in Mending Wool it's been really quite a neutral or ambiguous experience. Again, we can link to Mending Wool with this quote here. So 3 foggy mornings and 1 rainy day will rot the best birch fence a man can build. So if we know that Mending Wool uses the wall as a metaphor for something else, I think we can safely say that the birch fence mentioned here is a metaphor for something else as well. So that means you have to ask yourself, what is it being used as a metaphor for? So you have to imagine the husband sitting down. He is actually feeling quite unhappy about the task that he's doing, and he comments about a rotten fence. So perhaps the metaphor here is that the fence is a sense of social cohesion or a sense of cohesion within his family, which links nicely to the title of the poem, Home Burial, because it creates the idea that the home itself is being buried, the concept of home is being buried, their family is being buried, because they no longer have that sense of closeness. Okay, continuing to move on to the next. So what we have here is the wife making a generalisation. So from the time when one is sick to death, one is alone and he dies more alone. So you notice she uses the male pronoun he, and she uses the impersonal pronoun one, which shows that she's generalising from her own experience of being alone with her pain to say that everyone is alone in their pain. So this means that she has taken a moment of discovery and she has generalised from that individual experience to come to a universal conclusion. So again, that links very clearly to Tufted Flowers, where the persona generalises from his positive discovery. Okay, there's only one more thing that I wanted to talk about here, and that is the dash at the end of this stanza. So in this sentence, how can I make you? The logical word to follow there is see. So the word see has been cut off by the use of the dash. Note that it's not caesura because it's not happening in the middle of the line, it's at the end. So that means that it's simply a dash. So the dash has cut off the word see. And since seeing has been linked to discovering throughout this entire poem, cutting the word see off symbolises the husband's lack of ability to make discoveries. So you can see that in a way this is an extension of the seeing motif. So I've moved through that quite quickly and brought up a few different techniques there. Feel free to listen back to this a couple of times to make sure that you've caught everything. But if there's anything that you didn't follow, make sure that you do bring it up in class, because this is a much faster way of doing it than covering these annotations in class. So it's understandable if there's something that you just want to double check with me. Okay, thanks guys.